Obviously you can hear it's just very noisy, very messy, because I've now gained them, so I'm getting the toms when I need the toms, but I'm also getting all that noise. There's no filters. My biggest friend at the next step of the process is filters. Filters are way more powerful and way more important than a lot of people give them credit for. By purely filtering and filtering in context, in other words, what am I trying to do? Something like overheads, for example, depending on the genre you're playing, it's not just always it's filter out all the low end. If it's jazz music and all that, I can get such a nice kit sound off the overheads if I place them properly, a kit and kick or overhead mics on the kick drum, you know, and I'm sorted if I've placed the mics ready properly. But in a situation on most stages these days where there's a lot of noise going on, we close mic for a reason, but then you've got to create that sound. So a lot of guys go boss on dynamics in terms of gates and all that kind of stuff. I do gate, but there's how you can use the range on your gate quite effectively. See how my clip lights there? So that 5 dB that I put on all the toms is a bit much on the first two, so I'm going to go back 3 dB, 2 dB on those. So just to explain filters quickly, for those that don't understand, a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter is a very effective tool, and it's not in your EQ section, it's in your preamp section. A filter filters to infinity. It doesn't attenuate. If I turn down, if you look on the EQ on that channel, so I'm just going to select some random channel quickly. So if I turn down, I want to turn this into an analog. So there's low end at 100 Hertz. Okay. And there is high end at 10K. Sorry. So now I've got, and a lot of guys now use these as high pass and low pass filters, but I've only got an 8 on this desk. I've got 18 dB attenuation. 18 dB is not infinity. Most analog consoles got 15 dB, some got even 12 dB. You can turn it all the way down, but you're not getting rid of everything that you think you're getting rid of. Whereas a filter, I'll illustrate that quickly, is exactly that. It cuts out. So if I go onto, I'm just going to use my mic just to show you quickly. That's what you're listening to now. So if I go to mine, if I switch the filter off, you can already hear that proximity. If you're listening on something, I'm going to go analog, and I'm going to go to 100 Hertz, and I'm going to pull that down. So there you can hear the change happening, and it's quite effective, but there's a lot of proximity still there. So if I'm on a bass guitar or a drum where there's a lot of information on a bunch of BVs on a bunch of channels, what you end up with is four tom channels all hearing the same bass noise. They sum together. So I've pulled it down 18 or 15 dB now. You know, for every summed audio, it's plus 3 dB. So 4 of them, you know, the first 2 sum, second 2 sum, third 2 sum, that's 9. But they're all sum, and 1 and 4 sums, and 1 and 3 sums a little bit, and before you know it, there's a lot of low-end noise on your overall bus structure. So you get rid of that much better by just doing a filter like that. It is so much easier to do things like gate and compression when you're working with a proper signal. I'm working with a proper gain structure, which means the threshold on default, which is set to 0, and the default for the gate is set to 0. And I've set my gains properly, so when he does hit the toms, they peak above 0. So if I just press on the gate, it works the right way. Okay?
Quiet
these sound a bit wonky without each other. The reason for that is I used RX8. I pulled it in, I pressed the separate button, I pulled it out. I wasn't even listening to the settings. I just used the default settings. So it then spits out percussion, bass, vocals, and other. Other is all this. Vocals. Stop the track there. So, press stop quickly. So all I've done now is I've done gain structure, I've done filters, and I've done default gates on the toms just to keep them quiet for that noise that sits there. And I've done filters on the overheads, pan them obviously, and I've done filters on snare, the gate, no EQs on any channel. So if I show you, there's kick, snare, hi-hat, tom, overhead. Oh, there's an EQ there, I lied. So in case you missed that, I got effects going there. I just quickly had to patch into reverbs. I just used some standard ones. I went one at 800 millisecond. I put that on the bottom snare. Remember that one? And then I put a longer one of about, I don't remember, 1.2 seconds on the overheads and the toms. And you can actually hear what that did. The overheads, because I've dropped the filter so much, it's picking up the rim shot quite nice, the cross-stick shot quite nicely, and you actually heard that little splash. Toms are giving some space. I still haven't done any EQs. So I'm just doing systematically getting gain structures right, getting my filters, thinking about how I want to use things. I generally wouldn't be doing effects by now, but I got bored. And then I'm not saying don't EQ, but remember, I've got a good mic on a good source. Snare is not the best snare. He didn't use Tom's snare. Let me not use their snare. He bought his own snare, which is more for a different R&B type genre. But right microphone, right source, placed correctly. The 98s are all about 3 fingers, so about that thickness. What's that? 1.5 inches. Old school people. New school people, that's about 6 centimeters. Away from the toms. A lot of guys make the mistakes of putting their tom mics too close because they want more isolation. You will get more isolation, but your toms are going to sound, they're all just, slap. You don't get there's no breath, there's no breathing. So by getting off the skin a bit, get your percussive sound, you get the resonance. It's condenser mic, there's a lot of, so you have to control it a bit better. Hi-hat mics don't get too close, they get harsh. Snare mics, the snare is a loud instrument, but there's so much around it. So for isolation, you do tend to go close, but you must think about it. Guys use a lot of time, they use dynamic microphones, which have got proximity effect. Another lesson for if you don't understand what that is, go Google it. Proximity effect, and then they go in, they come right over the edge of the snare, and then they filter out, and they trying to figure out why they can't get any snap on their mic. So get up, get the angle right, and obviously face the spot where the drummer hits. Consider your hi-hat placement physically, tom placement, and get that microphone in a nice position. I pay a lot of attention to that because obviously I bring a condenser in as well. I get them one position, so I get my phasing right. I line up the capsules nicely, get them in there. And if you just come sort of sideways over the snare, like a lot of guys do, there's your snare and you come in and you're just flat. Proximity is your buddy. So if your intention is to get a nice boxy, boomy sound, it'll work. But if you want snap, get away from the skin with the side of the mic, aim at, and you need to be, again, about 3 fingers off the snare facing down. Side note then though, depending on how the drummer has set up, hi-hat position, bounce to overheads, all that kind of stuff has a play. So consider a lot of those things. And again, is it a condenser, is it dynamic, all these kind of things. But you can hear already, I don't even know what the time is, how long I've been going. I've done gain structure, I've done filters, and I've done some cleanup with gates. It's not 100%, but we're already in a position where, if the band had to start the show now, we can start the show.